One question I had going into this was, where did MultiGP come from? Chris is obviously the head, but how did he end up as this massive lead to an organizational event that supports drone racing? Well, Chris tells you about it, and here's a hint. It starts in his backyard in Florida, and it's pretty awesome. I hope you enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you the one, the only, the man who heads MultiGP itself, Chris Thomas. And welcome to the show, Chris Thomas. Thanks for coming on the Michael Rollins Show.
Yeah, thanks. You know, I see already we have something in common. You have drones on your back wall. Yes. I have drones on my back wall. So now, already we can be friends.
I see the Phantom. What's the other one up there?
Well, the Phantom was actually a Phantom that I shot down. So some people put a deer on their wall.
Right.
I have a Phantom.
Okay.
And then the other one was the Eclipse, which was made by a helicopter company, Gowie.
Okay.
It was a beautiful frame. Not really the best quad. It was their first version, but it was really beautiful. It was given to me on my birthday because no one wanted to fly it.
From what I can see, it looks very nice.
Yeah, it is. It's a beautiful quad. It was back in the days when weight didn't seem to matter that much because the flight controllers weren't that good.
Yeah.
Which doesn't seem like that long ago.
So how long ago was that?
That was designed in 2000 and I think it was early 2017. It could have been late 2016.
Okay. So, you know, one of the things I always like to ask my my interviewees is, tell me what your origin story is. Like, how did you get into drones, and
how did I get my superpowers?
Yeah, how did you get your superpowers? But not only that, how did you go from being in drones to like leading MultiGP?
Well, you know, I've told this story, and I've probably told it so much that memory being as soft as it is in my fleshy brain, it's probably changed a little bit.
Sure.
So I can't promise you that this is 100% exactly how it happened or how I remember it occurring. So what happened, there's an area very close to me. If you drive that direction behind me, about a half a mile, there's 15 square miles of roads where it was a housing project that never got finished. There are no curbs, there's no houses, there's no power lines. It's the reason why I live where I live. My brother and I, we fly powered parachutes out there.
Okay.
So I had the Phantom Vision 2 at the time, which was the new Phantom with its own gimbal. Very great machine. There it is now up on the wall. So, and I was attempting to chase a friend of mine in his drift car as he's drifting around the corners. Here I am chasing it with this Phantom, shooting the video, editing the video, which I'm not very good. If you look online, you can find videos that I've edited. They're not good. I don't spend a lot of time doing that. But when I uploaded it to a service and it recommended another video. It was a drone racing video. Never had heard of drone racing. I watched the video. I click about the person. They're in the same city that I live in. Like, what are the odds? Never seen drone racing. Then I went down the rabbit hole that most people who get into this did. I watched the video in France, racing around the trees with the LEDs. I saw a lot of that. So immediately, I just wanted to try this. I wanted to race a drone. It looked really fun. They flew FPV. The next weekend, I went to a local meet for drone enthusiasts. And they were the guys who were racing right here in the same city that I live in. Well, the weekend after was their first race that I could attend. I didn't have a drone, and they start telling me, okay, you need to buy this frame, and then you need to buy these motors and an ESC, and then a controller, and bind a controller, video transmitter, I just said, can I just buy one? Could I just give you money and have the drone ready to go? Because at the time, I wasn't an RC enthusiast.
Right.
I had a Phantom, but that doesn't make you an RC enthusiast. No offense to Phantom pilots, but you buy it and fly it. You don't have to know anything. So I convinced one of the local guys to sell me his own drone. I literally didn't have the time to build one. He sells me his. I get to the event. It doesn't work. Like, it won't arm. It was probably me. I couldn't get it to fly. So I sat there just riding along with pilots in the goggles until it just clicked. This was amazing. But the frustrating part for me was how slow they were doing the races, because no one wanted to organize. Everyone wanted to fly. So I saw an opportunity to really get this going. The next weekend, I found a location. I told the guys, hey, I'll run the race. And I thought I would be stepping on someone's toes or hurting someone's feelings. I didn't know at the time that people were happy to let me organize and they just wanted to come fly. So the next weekend I ran a race. It was terrible. It was horrible because no one in the group really understood video channels. So the guys would put their drones on the line. One person would put their goggles on and just change the dip switches randomly until they didn't think they had a video conflict.
Wow.
And then we'd start the race. Everyone would take off, lose their video, and crash. Well, not being one who's smart enough to just quit, I went back. I spent the entire week learning about the video transmitters and how they work and what they do, how the channels work. The next weekend, we did another race. Said, guys, let's do it again. I got it figured out. And I had made laminated cards that said specifically, you're on this channel, you're on that channel, you're on that channel. And it worked really good. And it was at that moment that we had our first big race. That's all that I wanted. I just wanted to go out and everybody race and just have a lot of fun. But as soon as I kind of got a taste for the reward of working towards this goal of running a race and putting it together, it inspired me to help some of the other local groups, and it just ran away from itself, and now we have MultiGP.
So one question I am curious about is you do fly yourself, right?
I do. I don't fly enough.
Okay. I think that's the answer everybody gives, by the way.
Yeah. Well, I would say for a while my excuse was I had broken all the quads that I built. Mm-hmm. There's nothing better to me than having brand new parts, building a brand new quad, and going to fly it. The hardest thing for me is to take one that I broke, try to remember what happened when I flew it last, because it's usually not the same day. I've waited a little bit of time, and I get frustrated there. I can't make that excuse anymore. I've got 3 built aircraft right here, and I haven't flown in a month.
Okay.
But I sit down to want to fly or get ready to fly and start thinking, we've got that race coming up. I really could do this for that race, or I could do that. So I get, I feel like I have to be an adult before I can go play.
Are you still organizing races in that area now?
So I gave up organizing races here locally. Okay. I'll go and stop in if they're having a race. I'll provide equipment. I'll go, someone will say, hey, we need a generator. The generator's dead. I'll go grab a generator for someone. But I haven't been, just because it got to the point to where it was all consuming. I was spending every waking hour of running MultiGP on the grand scale and organizing the local chapter.
Okay. When do you think you step back from organizing the local chapter versus running MultiGP on the larger scale?
So I stepped back about 2 years ago.
Okay.
From running the local chapter, primarily because as MultiGP started to gain momentum, the number of events and the number of races that started to occur everywhere was increasing. So there was a demand and a need for my assistance in a lot more places. So local races, I always loved. I loved going out and just putting a race together, hanging out with the people, seeing my friends, and it was a great day. Whenever I would commit to a weekend out of town, when I was back the following weekend, I didn't want to spend it running a local race because I was away from my family last weekend.
Right.
So it really just became a balance issue.
Okay. How much practical knowledge do you think you carried out of that organization that you did into general MultiGP in general? Oh,
well, quite a bit of it. I've always had the approach to just figure it out hands-on. Like instead of spending weeks and weeks working on theory, if I think that two drones can operate side by side on these two different frequencies, then I would just go outside and try it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really what the local chapter was, and it helped a lot. I mean, it got to the point to where when I was running so many races, every weekend running a race, if you could show me your video transmitter, and by sight I could tell you how to get onto what channel. I ran into so many issues where the pilot's saying, I've got bad video, or I'm having this issue. And just, I didn't know how to fix it. There was no manual. So just through trial and error, I gained this hands-on knowledge of figuring out where the problems lie. Now, that said, technology, as it's improved, a lot of those problems have gone away on their own.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the biggest improvement that you've seen in racing in the past, say, 3 years?
You know, the amount of people who have just rolled up their sleeves and said that, you know, I want to make this real where I live. That's been the biggest change. Technology is improved, right? The flight controllers have gotten a lot better, mm-hmm. which has made racing easier in terms of when you give an input, the aircraft does what you want it to do. Mm-hmm. So that's made a dramatic improvement in racing. But the real improvement is there are now so many experienced people in a local area who run a race. And so you'll find 50, 60, 70 races a weekend regularly, which mm-hmm. when we started, there was 1, 2.
So the number is actually on your website. I'm curious if that is an accurate reflection, but how many actual MultiGP racers are there in the world right now?
So
and how do you count them?
For a while, there's a lot of different numbers you can use it, right? You can look at the total number of registered pilots. That's not a very accurate number because there's plenty of guys who think about drone racing go and register a pilot profile. There's also a lot of local chapters that they do small events that they don't even set up a timer. They don't even set up a login. So there are also a lot of unregistered pilots out there that this is just something they do as a leisure activity. They're not very serious. When the racing gets really heated, they usually step back. But when we look at our registered pilot numbers, we have a little over 30,000. The website no longer links to our database.
Okay.
In terms of active pilots, if you want to see guys who are extremely serious about racing, I would look at the global qualifier list, especially for the U.S. We had about 1,000 pilots who've attended a global qualifier saying that I'm serious about racing, I want to get ranked at racing, and that's what that list does a really good job to reflect. That said, I'm sure if there's 1,000 who are really serious about racing, there's probably 5 times that number of real active racing pilots in the world right now. So it's still tiny, you know.
Now, you guys, speaking of the global qualifiers, you guys, have evolved over the past few years to how you handle qualification for the global qualification. Walk me through, because I started flying in 2016. I think 2017, you guys had the UTT tracks come out.
Right.
And then up until now, there's just one track that everybody flies.
Right.
And there's been different formats. Walk me through some of the changes that have taken place in how somebody qualifies. And also, like, what was the thinking behind that? So why did you switch from like a set of UTT tracks to one track that everybody flies, for instance, would be one question to come out of that.
There's a lot of factors that went into that, and some of those there was a lot of debate internally and externally in the decisions, and it was definitely not unanimous in how the changes were made. The way we originally designed the series, and if you look at where some of the great parts about MultiGP, but also the great flaws of MultiGP, is sometimes we approach these problems without worrying about cost, without worrying about resources, without worrying about manpower, and we design it at what is the ideal. Mm-hmm. Okay, so in an ideal world, to create a true championship that involves every pilot, it would start at a local area. You would be able to go somewhere locally, and from there find out if you are a good enough pilot to make it to a regional event. And then from that regional event, you would compete, and then that would distill down even further all the way to a national event, and then from there all the way to the grand championship, the world championship, whatever you want to call it, ideally. But to do that requires many venues, many people, quite a few events, all the resources that come into an event, the travel, everything else. We started running something like that. We ran the regional qualifiers that local chapters would run. Then that would go to a regional final that usually a local chapter or a few local chapters, along with people that we paid to send, would go and help run that regional final. And then that went to the championship. Well, that worked really well, and we love that format. I mean, some of the best memories have been at those regional finals. Some of the greatest races, like head-to-head battles we've ever seen, were at those races. The reason why we decided to move away from that is MultiGP, like the people who are volunteering their time and spending their days thinking about growing the sport, we would literally do 4 to 5 months of the entire year just working on this series. Mm-hmm. And so while we loved it, it prevented growth in other areas. And in order to make drone racing a reality, there's a lot of work to be done. So it was more of, we had to make a decision on where we were, how do we deal with the limited resources? Because right now, MultiGP is not really, even though it's structured as a business, MultiGP is structured. If you go to the IRS and you look at how we file taxes, this is structured as a for-profit business. Okay. For those people who aren't really business, savvy, that doesn't always mean that we're out there with chasing profit. We've been building this business with a primary purpose to grow this sport. And the only reason that we're not a nonprofit is because I'm lazy and afraid of things that accountants tell me could get me in a lot of hot water with the IRS. Yeah. So it has nothing to do with whether or not we're trying to just chase dollars. We don't want to ruin this sport by trying to make it just a way to make money. Right? If I woke up tomorrow and said, you know what, I'm going to get rich with MultiGP, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. But I think if the focus shifted from what we have to that, it would probably ruin what we're doing, what we're trying to accomplish right now, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Not to say that we want to pay the bills. That would be great, just getting the bills paid. It would one day, if I got a salary from doing this, it would be great. But I'm not counting on it. Mm-hmm. I've already come to terms with the fact that even if we never reach that level of financing a MultiGP, even if MultiGP dies one day, as long as the legacy of what we've all this effort we've put in continues forward and drone racing gets bigger and better, and the memories and the friends that we've made, that's always going to be that campfire story that you sit around and talk about. As long as we've done that, I would still feel that we've succeeded. So
well, go ahead.
I didn't know to finish the qualifying story, we've now changed it to one single track that any of the chapters can run, because we want to reduce the expense that a pilot has to pay. To get in. Drone racing is already a little bit more expensive. I know it is, because I remember being 11 years old, looking at a radio-controlled magazine, and I at the time when I was a kid, I loved the idea. I never saw one, I never got to fly one, but I loved the idea of an RC helicopter. And there was one that I remember, it was blue, and it was $200. And I just dreamed maybe one day I could buy that $200 helicopter. I had no idea I would need a controller, because I never even got to the point of being able to afford the helicopter.
Right.
So with drone racing, we want, if someone is good and they're talented and they have the skill, we want them to get discovered where they live, hopefully at a very affordable cost. Mm-hmm. And the way we have it structured right now makes it more accessible to more people.
So there's the origin of MultiGP. It grew organically, and today it is a behemoth. I'd like to thank Chris for coming on. He was a really great guest. very well spoken, and I feel like he represented MultiGP well. I'd also like to thank my patrons. My patrons are the people that keep this show running, and I would like to ask you to consider to become a patron. The patrons get exclusive content. They get an audio-only podcast. They get asked questions and help decide the direction of the channel. Pretty soon, patrons will have a say in who is going to be interviewed. Many things are in store for my patrons, and I would hope that you could become part of them. In the description below, you can find links to Chris and MultiGP, and you can also find links to my Patreon. Thank you, and I hope that you have a great week. Bye.